this trial is an interest piece for me, and it's funded through Hugh Williamson scholarship as well as a Yitpi foundation. And it's looking at frost mitigation in wheat. So we're looking at different cultivars, different times of sowing, and a late grazing strategy. So when I talk about late grazing, usually you'd pull stock off before you reach growth stage 30, before plants start to elongate. But in this case, we've grazed after that stage, so 30, 31, when you're starting to get nodes up the plant. And the whole idea of this is to say, how can we, if we're in an early sowing position, we're running into the risk of having heads out now, we've had a rain, it's come up and we maybe didn't expect it, can we hold back that flowering through some management strategies? And if we can, is it going to make a difference to our pocket at the end? And in terms of if we're going to run into a frost as well. So in this trial, 2 times of sowing. Our first sowing time, you can see on your map, I think it's the yellow, was sown on the 15th of April and obviously irrigated this year. So that received 10 mils with dripper just to get things up and going, and that's all the rain it's received since then. So our first time of sowing, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, is this block here. And then our second time of sowing, that's a border, sort of is this block here. So there's a fair difference that you can see there. Our second time of sowing went in on the 7th of May, and that just came up with rain. So I think we sort of had a few showers come through around the 8th and 10th of May, which was enough to sort of get it going.
When was the first sowing?
First sowing was the 15th of April, and that was irrigated on the 15th as well. So
how much rain did you simulate, Jen, for the irrigation to get it up?
So we did 10 mils with dripper. So whether that perfectly simulates rain, because it's obviously all concentrated in the furrow, it's yeah, it's a really good 10 mil. Yeah, so and I've got 6 different varieties in here, all wheats, and I've targeted different maturity drivers. So there's 2 winter wheats in here, which are probably those ones that are suited to the earlier sowing because they have what's called a vernalisation requirement. So they have to experience a winter, cold temperatures before they'll switch to their reproductive growth, which means that they have a wider sowing period you can put them in, but they'll still probably flower in a more stable period, whether you've sown it earlier or later, because it's got that requirement to reach before it'll switch. So the 2 winters in here are Illabo and Bennett. So Illabo is a shorter winter, probably better suited to this environment where things can cut off earlier at the end of the season, and Illabo is a longer winter, but it has performed quite well in terms of yield from our early sowing trials in the past. And Bennett's an awnless variety as well. Then I've got 4 spring wheats in here. So Vixen, which is our fastest developing wheat in here, Razor, slightly slower, Scepter, which is about the same as the Razor, and Catapult, which is slightly slower again. So just to get a little bit of spread across the maturities there. What I'm doing in this trial is tracking phenology, so looking at the growth stages and when they're sort of getting to that stage, and then obviously looking at how our grazing has affected how they're moving along. So the first time of sowing was grazed with a lawnmower on about the middle of June, I think just before the 20th. And you can pick those ones out, see how there's coloured pin markers at the back of the plots. So the plot in front of that pin marker was grazed, and they've had amazing recovery since then. So we can see it's been held back in its phenology a bit from that grazing that's recovered really well. We can walk through some of the plots and have a look in a second. But then also something to consider is that in July, and these are temperature tags here. I just downloaded one before you guys came out. And in July, we had some pretty significant frost events. So I think we had 5 days there that were all in negatives at canopy height, -5, -6. And some of those varieties were already elongating, so pretty susceptible to some of that frost that's going to really impact yield. And Kelly has pulled a few plants out to show. This is ungrazed vixen, so this is our fastest variety in the trial.
I can see there's a few heads that have been knocked out from the frost.
So clearly you don't want heads out at the moment.
No, vixen mid-April, probably mad.
That
But
was July, the frost, yeah.
yeah, and you can see that they're already starting to compensate by putting some fresh tillers out the base too. So there will be some recovery, but obviously these tillers are so late now that their ability to set similar grain number or head size, is not there. These ones are usually small regardless of what the spring conditions bring. So, but yeah, definitely got some damage. Probably only, I don't know, looking through some of those plots, Jen, probably only 5%, I would estimate. So just the more advanced plants or tillers.
So, yeah, when we grazed, as I said, it was a late grazing, so the idea was to knock off that growing tip and let it recover from that. So really try and knock it back in its maturity. And to some degree we have achieved that. So the idea of this late grazing to manipulate flowering timing, Kenton Corker, who now works with FAR but used to work with Sardi, he did a bit of work on it in South Australia across multiple sites and rainfall zones, and in some cases they were able to delay flowering by 7 to 15 days by grazing late, and also in some cases without seeing a significant yield impact on that if it had enough time to recover. So I suppose the question mark hangs over whether it's really going to be able to recover in this lower rainfall zone. But it's a potential tool we can use if we're worried about running into heads coming out when we're susceptible to frost events. So before we grazed, we did biomass cuts, so measuring the amount that we were removing, and also I sent them off for feed quality testing, so looking at the quality we could have got off it and I guess how much feed value we had. And then also, because this is looking at frost and frost management, later on in the season we'll do hay cuts, so a salvage option if you are frosted. What do we end up with, and what quality do we get from the hay cut? And then also we'll look at the yield economics as well, in terms of comparing the different varieties, the different sowing times, and grazed and ungrazed. So there's a bit to it.
How much biomass did you have at grazing time then?
Not an awful lot. With the first time of sowing, well, you're probably all aware that things were pretty slow going. We did get it up early, but it was pretty stressed moisture-wise.
I think one thing to remember too, though, is if you're targeting a late graze to shift phenology, you probably need to expect a yield penalty from it, because that primary tiller, that first one, is definitely your top yield setter in your crop, and your other tillers they don't set as many grain, they're not as big. If you're grazing late and you're taking that developing head out, that tiller's gone, and it's all your other tillers that are then got to feed the yield. So,
but it's the payoff of would you get frosted and lose more yield? Anyone had any questions? We might
You're definitely saving water by grazing, so you're not plant's not photosynthesizing. So often it can be, like, that's probably why there's no yield loss or better, because you're actually not using water when the plant's less biomass, but late grazing, that's different.
Yeah, but you would want it to be able to recover, and like James was out here as well. After these had been grazed and then we received some rain, they were yellow as because they were quite stressed already in the conditions that we'd had, and so they were just trying to recover and, well, essentially say, oh, we've got to reproduce and go for it. So yeah, it does. The recovery is the stress point for them, but yeah, definitely the idea was to try and hold it back maturity wise, which when you're removing the biomass, yeah, it doesn't have as much to recover with. So
You also need more nutrition
yeah,
to
to help it recover well. Yeah, we gave it a hit of nitrogen because it was just when that new growth was coming through, it was quite stressed. You come on through. So this plot here is Vixen, the fastest variety we've got in the trial, and this was grazed. And you know how I said we took a cut? That was cut basically so that you couldn't see anything above the ground, so that's how that's recovered. But then the rest of it was hit with the lawnmower, and that's how much that's recovered. So it was really down right at ground level about, what are we, June? Month and a half ago. So, and then that's, yeah, flag leaf-ish at the moment. And then if you come up here, this is that same variety, so Vixen, which didn't get the grazing. So you can see the difference there that it's made in terms of maturity. So we've got a fair few heads out already.
So these are vulnerable to frosting now.
Yeah. Yeah, probably ideal flowering for this environment is the middle of September. So we're really a fair bit early. Well, not quite flowering yet, but yeah, about a month before you want to be. And just to look at some of these winters, this is Illabo here. So that's the faster winter we've got in there. That is ungrazed, so that's just sown on the 15th of April, and that's where it's at now, so it's starting to elongate. And then I believe that is Bennett, but you're in timer sowing too. Vixen ungrazed. And that one just there, that sort of flat looking one, that is Bennett ungrazed. So slightly behind, but it's just sort of starting to go to that reproductive phase as well. So you can see how much those winters sown at the same time, but it's just that vernalisation requirement. They don't jump as quickly. So, yeah. If everyone's happy, that might wrap up this trial.